Imagine someone standing in front of you, voice raised, face tense, words sharp and cutting. They insult you. Maybe they call you incompetent, useless, or weak. Maybe they attack your appearance, your intelligence, your background, or your work. Most people, in that moment, feel a surge of heat in the chest. The heart rate climbs. The mind races with responses, comebacks, defenses, attacks. The urge to react becomes almost irresistible, but the Stoics would say something radical. The insult itself has no power over you, none at all. The only power it has is the power you give it. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a simple but transformative idea. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about those events. This principle, taught by the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, reshapes the way we interpret insults. When someone insults you, they are not injecting pain directly into your mind. Instead, they are offering a set of words, sounds, vibrations in the air. The pain comes afterward. When your mind interprets those words as threatening, humiliating, or unjust. In other words, the insult is the spark, but your judgment is the fuel. Most people live as if the world controls their emotional state. If someone praises them, they feel good. If someone criticizes them, they feel bad. If someone insults them, they feel angry or hurt. Their emotional life becomes a puppet, and other people hold the strings. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They believed that a wise person should not hand over control of their inner world to the unpredictable opinions of others. Think about how absurd it is to let someone else control your peace of mind. If a stranger walked up to you and demanded your wallet, you would refuse or call for help. Yet when someone insults you, many people hand over something far more valuable than money. They hand over their emotional stability. The Stoic approach is to guard the mind more fiercely than any treasure. To understand this mindset, imagine a simple scenario. Someone calls you a horse. Would you feel insulted? Probably not. You might laugh, or think the person is strange. But why does that word not hurt you? Because you know it is not true. You have no belief that you are a horse, so the insult slides off harmlessly. The Stoics would say this applies to all insults. If someone calls you stupid and it is not true, then the insult is like being called a horse, irrelevant and meaningless. If it is true, then the insult is not something to get angry about. It is useful feedback that can help you improve. This perspective dissolves the emotional sting of insults. Either the insult is false, in which case it is harmless, or it is true, in which case it is helpful. There is no situation where it is worth losing your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about this idea in his private journal, now known as Meditations. He reminded himself constantly that the opinions of others were outside his control and therefore not worth worrying about. He asked himself a simple question: what is the worst that someone's insult can actually do? It cannot change your character. It cannot erase your virtues. It cannot force you to act against your will. It is merely noise unless you choose to internalize it. One of the most powerful Stoic techniques for handling insults is what could be called the pause of reason. When someone insults you, the Stoics advise not reacting immediately. Instead, create a small gap between the insult and your response. In that gap, ask yourself, is this within my control? The answer is always no. You cannot control what someone else says, but you can control your reaction, and that reaction determines whether the insult becomes a source of pain or a moment of strength. This pause is crucial because most emotional reactions happen automatically. The insult triggers anger, and anger triggers words or actions that we later regret. But the Stoics train themselves to insert reason into that chain of events. They believe that humans are rational beings, and our greatest strength is our ability to choose our responses rather than act on impulse. Another key Stoic concept is the dichotomy of control. This idea divides everything in life into two categories: things you can control and things you cannot. Your thoughts, judgments, and actions are under your control. Other people's opinions, words, and behaviors are not. Insults belong firmly in the second category. They are outside your control. So the Stoics say they are not worth your emotional investment. When you internalize this idea, insults begin to lose their power. Imagine you are walking down the street and a dog barks at you. You do not take it personally. You do not stop and argue with the dog. You simply keep walking. The Stoics believe that many human insults deserve the same treatment. They are the expressions of someone else's confusion, anger, or ignorance. Why should you let those things disturb your inner peace? This does not mean the Stoics were passive or weak. On the contrary, they believed in strength of character above all else. But they defined strength differently than most people. For them, true strength was not about winning arguments or delivering clever comebacks. It was about maintaining control over your own mind. No matter what others said or did, Epictetus, who was born into slavery, experienced insults and humiliation regularly. Yet he taught that no one could truly harm him unless he allowed them to control his thoughts. He once said that if someone speaks badly of you, it is not your reputation they are damaging, it is their own character they are revealing. An insult is more of a reflection of the speaker than the target. Consider what usually motivates insults. Often they come from insecurity, jealousy, anger, or misunderstanding. A person who feels threatened might try to bring others down. A person who is unhappy might lash out. When you view insults this way, they become less personal. Instead of seeing them as attacks on your worth, you see them as symptoms of the other person's state of mind. This shift in perspective is powerful. It replaces anger with understanding. Instead of thinking, "How dare they insult me?" you start thinking, "What must be going on in their mind to make them act this way?" The insult becomes less about you and more about them. Another Stoic practice is negative visualization. This involves imagining difficult situations in advance so you are not caught off guard when they happen. A Stoic might start the day by thinking, "Today, I will meet people who are rude, arrogant, or insulting." By expecting these behaviors, they remove the element of surprise. When the insult comes, it feels less like an attack and more like something that was already part of the plan. Marcus Aurelius used this exact technique. He reminded himself each morning that he would encounter difficult people, but instead of resenting them, he saw them as part of the natural order of the world. Just as storms and cold weather are part of nature, so are difficult personalities. The key is not to wish for a world without insults, but to build a mind that remains steady despite them. The Stoics also believed in the importance of self-respect. When you are confident in your character and values, insults lose their impact. If you know you are acting with integrity, then someone else's opinion cannot shake you. But if your self-worth depends on external validation, then every insult feels like a threat. This is why Stoicism places so much emphasis on virtue. Virtue, in Stoic philosophy, means living with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. These qualities are entirely within your control. No one can take them from you unless you give them up yourself. So when someone insults you, the only real question is this: will you respond in a way that aligns with your virtues? If you respond with anger, cruelty, or revenge, you are the one harming your character. The insult did not damage you, your reaction did. But if you respond with calmness, patience, and dignity, you strengthen your character. The insult becomes an opportunity to practice virtue. Think of it like a test. Every insult is a small exam in self-control. The person insulting you is not your enemy. They are your trainer. They are giving you a chance to prove your strength of character. Without challenges, you would never know how strong your mind really is. The Stoics often used athletic metaphors to describe this idea. Just as a wrestler needs a strong opponent to become better, a person needs challenges to develop virtue. Insults are part of that training. They are the weights that build your mental muscles. Over time, as you practice these Stoic principles, something remarkable happens. Insults start to feel lighter. They no longer trigger the same emotional storms. Instead of reacting automatically, you observe them with curiosity. You might even feel a sense of calm detachment, as if you are watching the situation from a distance. This does not mean you become emotionless. The Stoics did not aim to eliminate emotions entirely. They aimed to eliminate destructive emotions, those based on false judgments. They believed it was possible to feel emotions like kindness, gratitude, and rational concern without being overwhelmed by anger or resentment. When someone insults you, The Stoic response is not to suppress your feelings or pretend the insult did not happen. It is to examine your judgment about the insult. Ask yourself, what exactly is hurting me here? Is it the words themselves, or my interpretation of them? Often, you will find that the pain comes from your own thoughts like they shouldn't have said that, or this means I'm not respected, or I need to defend my reputation. Once you see this, you realize that the insult is not the real problem. Your interpretation is, and interpretations can be changed. This is the core of the Stoic approach to insults. Control your judgments, and you control your emotional life. The world will always contain rude people, harsh words, and unfair criticisms. You cannot eliminate these things, but you can eliminate the suffering they cause by changing the way you interpret them in the end. Stoicism teaches that your peace of mind is your responsibility. No one can insult you into anger unless you agree with the insult or believe it threatens something important. When you build your self-worth on your own character rather than the opinions of others, insults become powerless. They turn from weapons into mere sounds in the air, brief disturbances that fade as quickly as they came. And in their place you gain something far more valuable, a calm, steady mind that no insult can shake. When an insult arrives, it rarely gives a warning. It appears suddenly, like a spark landing on dry grass. One careless word from someone else can ignite anger, shame, or resentment in a matter of seconds. Most people do not even realize how quickly the emotional reaction begins. The body responds before the mind has time to think. The face tightens. The chest contracts, the pulse quickens. In that moment, the insult feels like a direct attack on the self. An instinct tells us to strike back. The Stoics recognized this moment as the most important point in the entire emotional process. They believed that the key to handling insults was not clever comebacks or emotional suppression, but mastering the tiny window between the insult and your reaction. This brief space, sometimes only a few seconds long, is where your freedom lives. If you can control what happens in that space, you can control your entire emotional life. Epictetus described this idea through the concept of impressions. According to Stoic psychology, every event creates an impression in the mind. When someone insults you, the insult creates an impression that says, this is bad, this is humiliating, this is an attack. But the Stoics taught that impressions are not facts. They are suggestions, and you have the power to accept or reject them. Imagine your mind as a gate, and every impression is a visitor knocking on the door. Most people throw the door wide open without question. If the impression says, you have been insulted, they immediately believe it. If it says, you must defend yourself, they obey it. But the Stoics trained themselves to become gatekeepers. When an impression arrived, they paused and examined it before letting it in. This pause is what makes all the difference. Without it, your reaction is automatic. With it, your reaction becomes a choice. The Stoics practiced this pause deliberately. They did not wait for insults to happen and then hope they would remember their philosophy. Instead, they trained themselves daily to slow down their reactions. They reflected on their emotions, examined their judgments, and practiced responding calmly to small irritations. Over time, this training made the pause more natural. Even in difficult situations, think about how people usually react to insults. Someone makes a sarcastic comment, and within seconds, there is a heated argument. Voices rise, words become harsher, the situation escalates. But if one person simply paused for a moment, the entire chain reaction could be broken. The Stoics believe that anger is like a fire. It needs fuel to keep burning. That fuel comes from your thoughts like, they shouldn't have said that, or I need to show them they can't treat me this way. If you remove those thoughts, the fire has nothing to feed on. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to slow down his reactions. He wrote that when someone does something wrong, you should not be surprised or offended. Instead, you should ask yourself whether you have ever made the same mistake. This question creates distance between the insult and your reaction. It shifts your focus from anger to understanding. For example, imagine a coworker publicly criticizes your work in a meeting. The immediate impression might be, they are trying to embarrass me. Anger starts to rise. But if you apply the Stoic pause, you might ask yourself a few questions. Is this truly an attack, or are they expressing their opinion? Have I ever criticized someone else's work? Is my reaction helping the situation, or making it worse? These questions slow down the emotional response. They bring reason back into the process. And reason, according to the Stoics, is the natural guide of the human mind. Another powerful Stoic technique for this moment is to describe the insult in neutral, factual terms. Instead of saying, "They humiliated me," you might say, "They spoke words that criticized my performance." Notice the difference. The first description is emotional and loaded with judgment. The second is neutral and objective. The Stoics believed that emotional language intensifies emotional reactions. By using neutral descriptions, you reduce the emotional charge of the situation. This makes it easier to stay calm. Epictetus gave a famous example of this idea. He said that when you kiss your child, you should remind yourself that you are kissing a mortal. This was not meant to be cold or heartless. It was meant to train the mind to see things as they are, without attaching exaggerated emotional judgments to them. In the same way, when someone insults you, you can remind yourself, these are just words. They are vibrations in the air. They do not have the power to harm me unless I give them that power. This mental reframing takes practice, but it becomes easier over time. At first, you might only remember to pause after you have already reacted. Then you might remember in the middle of the reaction. Eventually, you will remember before the reaction even begins. The Stoics also believed in the importance of physical control during emotional moments. They understood that the body and mind influence each other. When you are angry, your body becomes tense and agitated. But if you deliberately relax your body, your mind begins to calm down as well. So when an insult occurs, a Stoic might focus on something simple, taking a slow breath, relaxing their shoulders, or softening their facial expression. These small physical actions can interrupt the automatic anger response. Don't think of it as hitting the brakes on a speeding car. The car does not stop instantly, but it begins to slow down. The same is true for emotional reactions. The pause, the breath, the neutral description, these are all ways of slowing down the emotional momentum. Another Stoic insight is that insults often feel worse because we imagine an audience. We worry about what others think. We imagine our reputation being damaged. But the Stoics believe that reputation is largely outside our control. People will think what they want, regardless of what we do. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the opinions of others are fleeting and unreliable. Today someone might praise you, tomorrow they might criticize you. If you tie your self-worth to those opinions, your emotional state will constantly rise and fall. Instead, the Stoics advised focusing on your own character. Ask yourself, am I acting with integrity? Am I living according to my values? If the answer is yes, then an insult cannot truly harm you. This shift in focus from external opinions to internal character makes the pause much easier. When someone insults you, you no longer feel the need to defend your reputation at all costs. You simply check your own actions and judgments. If you know you are doing your best, the insult becomes less threatening. It is just another person's opinion, not a verdict on your worth. The Stoics also practiced what could be called compassionate interpretation. Instead of assuming the worst about the person insulting them, they try to understand the reasons behind the behavior. Maybe the person is stressed, insecure, or misinformed. Maybe they are acting out of pain or frustration. This does not excuse the insult, but it changes your emotional response to it. It is much harder to feel intense anger towards someone you see as confused or struggling. Compassion softens the reaction. Imagine someone yelling at you in traffic. You might feel angry at first, but then you imagine that they are rushing to the hospital to see a sick relative. Suddenly, your anger fades. The situation looks different. The Stoics applied this kind of thinking regularly. They believe that most bad behavior comes from ignorance rather than malice. People act wrongly because they do not know better. And just as you would not hate someone for making an honest mistake, you should not hate someone for insulting you out of ignorance. Another technique the Stoics used was to view insults from a broader perspective. They often reminded themselves of the vastness of time and space. In the grand scheme of the universe, what does one person's insult really matter? Marcus Aurelius frequently reflected on how small and temporary human life is. He reminded himself that both he and the people insulting him would soon be gone. Their words, their arguments, their reputations, all of it would fade into history. This cosmic perspective makes insults seem trivial when you think about the size of the universe or the length of time before and after your life. A single harsh comment loses its importance. The Stoics were not trying to dismiss real problems or ignore injustice. They were simply putting things in proportion. Many insults feel enormous in the moment, but when viewed from a wider perspective, they shrink dramatically. The pause, then, is not just about staying silent for a few seconds. It is about shifting your perspective. It is about stepping back from the emotional storm and looking at the situation with reason. In that pause, you might remind yourself of several Stoic truths. The insult is just words. The opinion of others is outside your control. Your character is what truly matters. The person insulting you may be acting out of ignorance or pain, and in the grand scheme of the universe, this moment is very small. With these reminders, the emotional intensity begins to fade. The urge to react weakens, and you regain control of your response. From this calm state, you can choose how to act. Sometimes the best response is silence. Sometimes it is a calm correction. Sometimes it is walking away. The Stoics believed that the right response depends on the situation, but it should always come from reason, not anger. The true power of the Stoic pause is that it turns insults into opportunities. Instead of being moments of humiliation or conflict, they become moments of practice. Each insult is a chance to strengthen your self-control, patience, and wisdom. Over time, this practice builds a kind of emotional armor, not the kind that makes you cold or unfeeling, but the kind that protects your inner peace. Insults bounce off without leaving lasting damage. And the more you experience this, the more confident you become in your ability to handle difficult situations. You realize that your emotional state does not have to depend on other people's words. You carry your calmness with you, like a shield that no insult can penetrate. This is the Stoic pause, a small moment of awareness that transforms the entire experience of being insulted. It is simple, but not easy. It requires practice, patience, and self-discipline. But once mastered, it gives you something priceless, the ability to remain calm and steady, no matter what others say. To the average person, an insult is an attack. It feels like something negative that must be defended against, corrected, or returned with equal force. But to a Stoic, an insult is not primarily an attack. It is an opportunity. It is a chance to practice virtue, strengthen the mind, and refine one's character. In fact, many Stoics believed that insults were among the most useful experiences a person could have if they were approached with the right mindset. This idea might seem strange at first. Why would anyone view an insult as something useful? Because the Stoics believed that the purpose of life was not comfort, pleasure, or social approval. The purpose of life, according to Stoic philosophy, was to develop a strong and virtuous character. Everything else, wealth, reputation, praise, criticism, was secondary. These things were called externals, and they were considered indifferent when compared to virtue. If virtue is the highest good, then anything that helps you develop virtue becomes valuable. And insults, surprisingly, are very good at doing that. Think about physical training. If you want to build muscle, you need resistance. You need weight. Lifting something light and easy will not make you stronger. The same is true for the mind. If your life is filled only with praise, agreement, and comfort, you never have to practice patience, humility, or self-control. But when someone insults you, suddenly you have a challenge. You must decide how to respond. You must practice restraint. You must choose reason over anger. In that sense, the person insulting you is providing resistance, the kind that builds mental strength. Epictetus often compared life to a gymnasium. In a gym, you do not complain about heavy weights. You use them to get stronger. Likewise, he said that difficult people and harsh words are like training equipment for the soul. Without them, you would never develop resilience. This shift in perspective is powerful. Instead of thinking, why is this happening to me? You start thinking, what can I learn from this? the insult becomes less of a threat and more of a lesson. For example, imagine someone insults your intelligence. Your first reaction might be anger or embarrassment, but the Stoic approach would be to examine the insult calmly. Is there any truth in it? If there is, then the insult becomes useful feedback. It shows you an area where you can improve. And if there is no truth in it, then it becomes a test of your patience and self-confidence. Either way, it serves a purpose. This is what the Stoics meant when they said that nothing is truly bad unless it damages your character. An insult does not damage your character by itself. Only your reaction can do that. If you respond with anger, cruelty, or revenge, you harm your own character. But if you respond with calmness, understanding, and self-control, you strengthen it so the insult becomes a fork in the road. One path leads to emotional turmoil and regret. The other leads to growth and inner strength. The choice is always yours. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself of this idea. He wrote that when someone does wrong, you should see it as an opportunity to practice patience and kindness. Instead of seeing difficult people as enemies, he saw them as teachers. They gave him chances to practice the virtues he valued most. This approach transforms the emotional meaning of insults. Instead of feeling like personal attacks, they start to feel like exercises. Each one becomes a small test of your Stoic training. Consider how athletes view competition. A strong opponent is not seen as a problem, but as a valuable challenge. Without strong opponents, the athlete cannot improve. In the same way, a person who never faces criticism or insults has fewer chances to develop resilience. The Stoics believed that adversity is essential for growth. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, wrote that misfortune is what tests the quality of a person. Just as fire tests gold, difficulty tests character. Without tests, you never know what you are made of. Insults, though often unpleasant, are one of the most common forms of difficulty. They happen in workplaces, families, social settings, and online spaces. They are part of human interaction, and because they are so common, they provide regular opportunities for training. But this training only works if you adopt the Stoic mindset. If you respond to every insult with anger, you are not training, you are just repeating the same emotional patterns. The Stoics believed that awareness and reflection were essential. After each difficult interaction, they would examine their response and ask themselves what they could have done better. For example, after being insulted, a Stoic might reflect at the end of the day. They might ask, did I remain calm? Did I respond with reason or with anger? Did I let the insult disturb my peace of mind? And if they found that they reacted poorly, they would not punish themselves. Instead, they would treat it as a lesson for the future. This practice of self-reflection was central to Stoic training. It turned everyday experiences, including insults, into sources of wisdom. Another Stoic technique was to imagine the person insulting you as a teacher. This might sound strange, but it is a powerful mental shift. Instead of seeing them as an enemy, you see them as someone helping you practice virtue. For instance, if someone insults you and you feel the urge to react, you might think, this person is giving me a chance to practice patience. Without them, I would not have this opportunity. In this way, the insult becomes a kind of gift, an uncomfortable one, but a useful one. This does not mean you should seek out insults or tolerate abusive situations. The Stoics were not advocates of passive suffering. They believed in using reason to improve your circumstances when possible, but they also recognized that some difficulties cannot be avoided, and when they occur, the best response is to use them as training. Another important Stoic reframe is the idea that insults reveal more about the speaker than the target. When someone insults you, they are showing you their character. They are displaying their anger, insecurity, or ignorance. The insult becomes a window into their mind. Imagine someone shouting at a waiter in a restaurant. Even if you are not the target, you immediately form an opinion about that person. You see their behavior as rude or unreasonable. The same principle applies when someone insults you. Other people often judge the insulter more harshly than the person being insulted. Epictetus emphasized this point. He said that if someone speaks badly of you, it is their own character they are revealing. They are the ones acting poorly, so why should you become upset and join them in that behavior? When you adopt this perspective, insults lose their emotional sting. Instead of feeling attacked, you feel detached. You see the insult as information about the other person, not as a statement about your worth. The Stoics also practiced humility in the face of insults. They recognized that no one is perfect. Everyone has flaws, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. So when someone criticized them, they did not automatically dismiss it. They considered whether there might be some truth in it. This humility made insults less threatening. If you accept that you are imperfect, criticism does not feel like a shocking attack. It feels like part of the natural process of growth. For example, if someone calls you impatient, you might initially feel defensive, but if you reflect honestly, you might realize that you do struggle with impatience. In that case, the insult becomes a reminder of something you already know, and instead of getting angry, you can use it as motivation to improve. This approach requires honesty and self. It is not easy to admit your flaws, but the Stoics believed that this honesty was essential for personal growth. They preferred uncomfortable truths to comforting illusions. Another powerful Stoic reframe is the idea that insults cannot truly harm you unless they affect your character. Words alone cannot damage your virtue. Only your own actions can do that. This idea gives you a sense of control. No matter what others say or do, your character remains in your hands. You are the one who decides how to respond. The Stoics believed this was the ultimate form of freedom. External circumstances might be difficult or unfair, but your inner world remains under your control. Insults cannot take that away from you unless you let them. Over time, as you practice this Stoic reframe, insults begin to feel different. They no longer trigger the same emotional reactions. Instead of feeling attacked, you feel challenged. Instead of feeling hurt, you feel curious. Instead of reacting automatically, you respond deliberately. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires practice, reflection, and patience. But with time, the Stoic mindset becomes more natural. Insults lose their power, and you gain a deeper sense of inner stability. You start to see that the real goal is not to avoid insults, but to become the kind of person who cannot be shaken by them. A person whose peace of mind is not dependent on the opinions of others. A person who remains calm and steady even in the face of criticism or disrespect. This is the Stoic ideal. A mind that is strong, flexible, and unshaken by external events. And insults, rather than being obstacles, become stepping stones on the path to that ideal. Understanding Stoic ideas about insults is one thing. Applying them in the heat of the moment is another. Philosophy becomes truly powerful only when it changes behavior. The Stoics were not interested in theory alone. They wanted practical wisdom guidance that could be used in real conversations, real conflicts, and real moments of tension. So the question naturally arises, when someone insults you, what should you actually do? The Stoic answer is simple in principle but deep in practice. You should respond in a way that protects your character, preserves your peace of mind, and reflects your values. The goal is not to win the argument or silence the other person. The goal is to remain calm, rational, and virtuous. This begins with the realization that not every insult deserves a response. In fact, many insults are best met with silence. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness. Many people believe that if they do not respond to an insult, they are allowing themselves to be disrespected. But the Stoics saw silence differently. They saw it as a sign of strength and self-control. Anyone can react impulsively. Anyone can shout back, argue, or insult in return. But it takes discipline to remain calm and composed. Epictetus once advised his students that if someone speaks badly of them, they should simply respond by saying, "You must not know me very well, because if you did, you would mention my other faults too." This response is not defensive or angry. It is calm, humble, and even slightly humorous. It removes the emotional charge from the situation. Humor was actually one of the Stoics' subtle tools. A light, self-aware response can diffuse tension more effectively than anger ever could. When you do not react emotionally, the person insulting you often loses their momentum. Insults thrive on reaction. Without it, they fade. But silence or humor is not always the right response. Sometimes, the situation calls for a calm and rational reply. The key difference between a Stoic response and a typical emotional reaction is the tone and intention behind it. A Stoic response is never driven by anger or the desire for revenge. It is guided by reason and the desire for clarity or justice. The Stoic does not seek to humiliate the other person or prove their superiority. Instead, they aim to resolve the situation in a way that aligns with their values. For example, imagine a coworker publicly insults your work. An emotional reaction might involve snapping back with an insult of your own, or raising your voice in defense. But a Stoic response would be calm and direct. You might say, "If there is something specific you think can be improved, I'm open to hearing it." This response shifts the conversation from personal attack to constructive discussion. Notice what this does. It removes the emotional element and focuses on facts. It also demonstrates confidence. You are not threatened by the criticism because your self-worth is not tied to their opinion. Another Stoic principle in responding to insult is to match your reaction to the importance of the situation. Not every insult is worth the same amount of energy. Some are trivial and can be ignored. Others may involve important matters such as justice, fairness, or the well-being of others. In those cases, a response may be necessary. The Stoics believed in acting according to reason and virtue, not emotion. So, if an insult is causing real harm, such as bullying, harassment, or injustice, it may be appropriate to address it firmly. But even then, the response should remain calm and rational. For instance, if someone repeatedly insults you in a professional setting, a Stoic approach might involve setting clear boundaries. You might say, in a calm tone, "I'm here to work professionally. If you have feedback, I'm willing to hear it, but personal insults are not productive." This response is assertive without being aggressive. It protects your dignity without sacrificing your composure. The Stoics understood that being calm does not mean being passive. It means acting with intention rather than impulse. Another important aspect of the Stoic response is timing. Sometimes, the best response is not immediate. If emotions are high, it may be wiser to step away and address the issue later. When both parties are calm. Imagine someone insults you during a heated argument. In that moment, any response you give is likely to be influenced by emotion. But if you take time to cool down, you can approach the situation more rationally. Later you might say, "Yesterday's conversation got heated. I'd like to talk about it calmly." This approach reflects one of the Stoic virtues, self-control. It shows that you are not controlled by your emotions or by the behavior of others. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of intention. When you respond to an insult, ask yourself, "Why am I saying this? Is it to hurt the other person, to defend my ego, or to resolve the situation in a reasonable way?" If your intention is rooted in anger or pride, the Stoics would advise against speaking at all. Words spoken in anger often lead to regret. But if your intention is to clarify, correct, or improve the situation, then a calm response may be appropriate. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to act with kindness, even toward difficult people. He believed that responding to harshness with harshness only multiplies negativity, but responding with calmness and understanding can break the cycle. Imagine someone insults you expecting a heated argument. Instead, you respond calmly and respectfully. This unexpected reaction can shift the entire dynamic. The other person may feel embarrassed or disarmed. The conflict may dissolve. This is the quiet power of the Stoic response. It does not rely on force or aggression. It relies on composure, reason, and dignity. Another Stoic strategy is to focus on the bigger picture. Ask yourself, will this insult matter in a week, a month, a year? In most cases, the answer is no. The insult feels intense in the moment, but its long-term importance is small. By keeping this perspective, you avoid overreacting to minor provocations. You conserve your energy for things that truly matter. The Stoics were very selective about where they invested their emotional energy. They understood that life is short and time is limited. Wasting emotional energy on every insult or criticism was seen as foolish. Seneca wrote that a wise person does not allow themselves to be disturbed by trivial things. They choose their battles carefully, and many insults, when viewed calmly, are simply not worth the effort. Another important Stoic idea is that your response should reflect who you want to be. not who the other person is. If someone is rude, you do not have to be rude in return. If someone is angry, you do not have to become angry. Your behavior is a reflection of your character, not theirs. This idea gives you freedom. You are not trapped in a cycle of reaction. You are not forced to mirror the behavior of others. You can choose a different path. For example, if someone insults you out of frustration, you might respond with patience. If someone mocks you, you might respond with calm humor. If someone criticizes you unfairly, you might respond with quiet confidence. In each case, your response reflects your values, not their behavior. The Stoics believed that this consistency of character was a sign of true strength. Anyone can be kind to friendly people, but it takes real strength to remain calm and kind when faced with hostility. They also believed that your example could influence others. When you respond to insults with calmness and dignity, you set a different standard for behavior. You show that it is possible to handle conflict without anger or cruelty. This does not guarantee that others will change, but it increases the chances of a more peaceful outcome. Finally, the Stoic response to insults always comes back to one central question. What is the virtuous thing to do in this moment? Virtue, for the Stoics, included wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. When faced with an insult, you can ask yourself, what would a wise person do here? What would a just person do? What would a person with strong self-control do? These questions guide your response. They shift your focus from defending your ego to acting according to your values. In many cases, the virtuous response is calmness. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a rational correction. Sometimes it is setting boundaries. But it is never blind anger or revenge. Over time, as you practice these responses, you develop a kind of emotional stability that others can sense. You become known as someone who does not overreact, someone who remains composed under pressure. And this reputation, like the fleeting opinions of others, is built on your actions and character. It is something real and lasting. This is the Stoic response to insults.com, deliberate and guided by virtue. It is not about suppressing emotions or pretending insults do not exist. It is about choosing your reactions wisely, protecting your inner peace, and acting in a way that reflects your highest values at the deepest level. Stoicism is not just about techniques for handling insults. It is about becoming the kind of person for whom insults lose their power entirely. The Stoics were not trying to build clever strategies for social conflict. They were trying to build unshakable minds that remain steady no matter what the world throws at them. To reach this state, the Stoics focused on one central idea. Your character is the only thing that truly belongs to you. Everything else, your reputation, your possessions, your status, even your body, can be taken away or changed by circumstances. But your character, your ability to choose how you think and act, remains under your control. This is why insults become less important in the Stoic worldview. An insult can only affect your reputation, not your character. And since reputation is outside your control, it is not worth worrying about. The Stoics believe that the opinions of others are unstable and unpredictable. One person might praise you, another might criticize you, and both could be wrong. If you build your self-worth on the opinions of others, your emotional state will constantly rise and fall. But if you build it on your own character, you gain stability. You know who you are, regardless of what others say. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of this truth. He wrote that if someone despises you, it is their problem, not yours. Your task is to ensure that you do nothing worthy of contempt. As long as your actions are guided by virtue, the opinions of others cannot harm you. This idea shifts the focus inward. Instead of asking, "What do others think of me?" the Stoic asks, "Am I acting according to my values?" This internal focus creates a deep sense of independence. You no longer depend on praise to feel good about yourself, and you no longer fear insults. To become this kind of person, the Stoics practiced daily self. At the end of each day, they would reflect on their actions. They would ask themselves questions like, did I act with wisdom today? Did I lose my temper unnecessarily? Did I let someone else's words disturb my peace? This practice helped them stay aware of their own character. It also allowed them to correct their mistakes. If they reacted poorly to an insult, They would not punish themselves. Instead, they would treat it as a lesson and aim to do better next time. Over time, this daily reflection built a strong sense of self-knowledge, and self-knowledge made insults less threatening. When you know your strengths and weaknesses, the opinions of others lose their emotional weight. For example, if someone insults your intelligence, but you know you are capable and constantly improving, the insult does not shake you. And if someone points out a real weakness, you can accept it calmly, because you are already aware of it. The Stoics believe that self-respect should come from within, not from external approval. When your sense of worth comes from your own actions and values, insults cannot easily reach you. Another important Stoic practice was voluntary discomfort. This involved deliberately exposing oneself to small hardships, cold weather, simple food, physical exertion to build resilience. The idea was to train the mind to handle discomfort without complaint. While this practice was often physical, it also had a mental aspect. The Stoics would expose themselves to criticism and difficult conversations, not to seek suffering but to build emotional strength. By facing discomfort regularly, they became less sensitive to it. In the same way, repeated exposure to insults handled calmly builds emotional resilience. Each time you respond to an insult with composure, you strengthen your mind. The next insult becomes easier to handle. Eventually, insults lose their emotional impact altogether. They become like background noise, something you notice but do not react to. The Stoics also emphasized the importance of perspective. They frequently reminded themselves of how small human concerns are in the grand scheme of the universe. This was known as the view from above. In this exercise, you imagine looking at your life from a great height. You see your city, your country, and eventually the entire planet. You see billions of people, each with their own worries, conflicts, and opinions. From this perspective, a single insult seems very small. Marcus Aurelius used this exercise to remind himself that human praise and blame are temporary and insignificant. People who insult you today will be gone tomorrow. Their words will fade, just like the words of countless others before them. This perspective does not make life meaningless. Instead, it helps you focus on what truly matters: your character and your actions. It reminds you not to get caught up in trivial conflicts. Another key aspect of the unshakable Stoic mind is emotional independence. This means that your emotional state is not controlled by external events. Instead, it is guided by your own judgments and values. Most people live in a state of emotional dependence. They feel good when others approve of them and bad when others criticize them. Their happiness is tied to circumstances they cannot control. The Stoics rejected this way of living. They believed that true freedom comes from emotional independence. When your happiness depends on your own character rather than external approval, you become resilient. Insults no longer threaten your happiness, because your happiness does not depend on the opinions of others. This does not mean the Stoics were indifferent to relationships or social harmony. They valued kindness, cooperation, and justice, but they did not base their self-worth on how others treated them. They aimed to be good people, regardless of how others behaved. This mindset creates a powerful form of inner peace. You stop worrying about every negative comment or criticism. You stop trying to control how others see you. Instead, you focus on living according to your principles. And when you do that, insults lose their ability to disturb you. Another Stoic insight is that time erases most insults. Think about the arguments and conflicts you had years ago. Many of them probably seem trivial now. The insults that once felt so painful have faded from memory. The Stoics used this awareness to stay calm in the present. They knew that most insults would not matter in the long run, so why let them disturb your peace today? Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. When someone insults us, we imagine all kinds of consequences: damage to our reputation, loss of respect, future conflicts. But most of these fears never materialize. By focusing on the present moment and the reality of the situation, the Stoics avoided unnecessary suffering. In the present moment, an insult is just a few words. It is not a permanent mark on your character. It is not a life-changing event. It is simply something that happened, and once you see it that way, it becomes much easier to stay calm. The Stoics also believed in the power of example. When you handle insults with calmness and dignity, you influence the people around you. You show them a different way of responding to conflict. Your behavior becomes a quiet form of teaching. Others may notice your composure and begin to question their own reactions. In this way, your Stoic mindset spreads outward. But even if others do not change, your own peace of mind remains intact. And that is the Stoic goal. In the end, the Stoic approach to insults is not about clever words or emotional tricks. It is about building a strong inner foundation. When your self-worth is based on your character, insults lose their power. When your reactions are guided by reason, insults lose their sting. When your perspective is broad and calm, insults lose their importance. You become like a rock in the ocean. Waves crash against it, storms rage around it, but it remains steady. The insults of others are like those waves, loud, forceful, and temporary. They come and go, but your character remains. This is the unshakable Stoic mind.com, resilient and independent. A mind that does not depend on praise and is not disturbed by insults. A mind that remains steady, no matter what words are thrown its way. And when you reach this state, you discover something surprising. The world feels lighter. Conflicts lose their intensity. Other people's opinions no longer dominate your thoughts. You move through life with a quiet confidence, knowing that your peace of mind is secure, not because the world is gentle, but because your mind is strong. This is how the Stoics handled insults without losing their cool. Not through suppression, revenge, or clever arguments, but through wisdom, perspective, and the steady practice of virtue.